The Energy Transition Podcast takes you directly into the cutting edge of the global energy sector shift, with a specific focus on the critical role played by oil and gas, as well as the pathways developing around a lower carbon future. Your host, Dan Pickering, founder of Pickering Energy Partners, is joined by Josh Lowrey, President of Upright Digital. Each episode engages industry thought leaders in an exploration of market-moving trends and topics, including new technologies, ESG, capital markets, inclusion and diversity, workforce innovation, regulatory influence, and the voice of the people. Join us as the Energy Transition Podcast looks at the state of the traditional energy and oilfield service sectors, emerging technologies, and the path ahead in a world of lower carbon energy development.
Welcome to the Energy and Transition Podcast. My name is Josh Lowrey. I am joined, as usual, with the co-host extraordinaire, Mr. Dan Pickering. How are you, sir?
Hi, Josh. Doing great.
Well, Dan, we are not in our usual digs. We are in our new digs.
And good digs they are.
Are they phenomenal?
Yes.
I wanted to impress you.
Here at the offices of Pring, they've, I guess, fabulous that they've given you all this.
Yes,
space.
this was a kind of a catch-all room for a couple months, and we walked in. I said, "What are you gonna do with this?" They said, "Well, maybe a ping pong table." I go, "Let us partner with you guys, and we'll build the studio out through Upright in the Pring and Associates office." And they gave us just really the only people that were hard to deal with were the building owners. We're like, "You don't know what we're bringing you. We're bringing you a first-class podcast studio." So they were actually great once it was all said and done. But this is it. I mean, the grand opening is today. So
First one.
Wow. Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
I'm warning everybody that's listening that I am jacked up right now. We are going to have a hell of a next 45 minutes because I showed up 30 minutes late, which if I'm 3 minutes late, I'm anxious.
Yes.
And so 30 minutes, that means I'm a wreck. So if I say something stupid, you'll know it's
what this that 30 minutes allowed me to do was get to know our guest a little bit more personal before we start talking about the professional. You have invited a gentleman's gentleman here today. This is going to be quite a pleasant conversation. It's fully educational. It's going to be great. But I'm glad Dan was late.
Yeah.
I really am. I got some
time. No,
really pleasant to meet you, sir. It's going to be a great interview today, and thanks for coming to do this. Have you done a podcast before?
Not like this. I mean, I've done interviews and I've done lessons and teaching and things like that, but I will say I've not sat around in a room at a podcast like this. So.
Excellent. Well, everything is downhill for you after this. This is as good as it gets. So,
that's right.
Good.
Well, thank you for being our guest. Dan, you want to do our introduction?
Absolutely. So I am thrilled to introduce David Modesett. David's the founder and president of Arc57, which we're going to learn more about here in a minute. But David's been just a smart guy to talk to for me for a decade plus, and I am thrilled that we've got a chance to visit with him. And for those of you that like to sort of check out websites at the same time that you're listening or watching the podcast, www.arc57.com is where you'll see more, but we're going to get through all of it. But before we do that, David, you get the floor to tell us who you are, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, as we were talking about earlier, 7th generation Texan. We've been around here since before it was Texas, and we love Houston. I think it's the most important city on the planet. I think that its entrepreneurial spirit is what drives energy innovation, which is what fuels the entire world. And there's literally no other city like Houston. And I think 80% of Texans identify themselves as a Texan before they do as an American or somebody from the United States. And so I think that's me. I went to school here, went to school in Austin, a little school up there that is hopefully going to go on to win the national championship this year. We should. Not sure we're going to.
Our producer's an Aggie, so we got to be careful. Show's bad here.
I tell you what, we hire more Aggies than we do T-SIPs. Just to be frank. But grew up here and then got out of school in the mid-'80s with being a history and English major catapults you into the job market, really, particularly at opportunistic times like 1985, 1986, when everything was horrible in Texas. So I went into the natural gas business, but didn't really understand that at that time, because they were deregulating gas in 1986, Martha Hesse and Order 436 and all those things. that basically everything that you knew about natural gas prior to 1986 was irrelevant. And if you happened to start businesses, which a lot of people did, Chesapeake and Enron and Natural Gas Clearinghouse and all these things, started then and then went on to become amazing, interesting things because you got in at that kind of inflection point. They call those inflection points in history. So that was awesome. And so the energy business has been a great place to be for the last.
So you said you got in the natural gas business. What's that mean? Were you a trader or?
I went to work for free.
He was a librarian given his.
Yeah, I went to work for free at a company called Taos Power. They were actually trying to do infield power generation development. They went on to become famous for building Moss Bluff and Egan and developing really the storage business. But they were trying to start a marketing and trading company at the same time. And so me and a friend of mine now, Chris Baggins, I didn't know at the time, on August 1st, 1987, started work there. And Chris and I have been working together since that day. And, I did a couple years there. Then I went to Brooklyn Interstate Natural Gas, did a couple years doing that. And then I started my own business in 1990, where I was a commodity trading advisor and raised $25 million back when $25 million was a lot of money.
Yes.
And
that was the birth of Vega.
That was the birth of, that company was actually called Damco. It was a commodity trading fund.
Okay.
But that was, the NYMEX had just opened. We just had the Gulf War, the opportunity to trade. There were many times when we would be 30 or 40% of the open interest in the natural gas contract because it was so illiquid back in the day.
With a start from 25 million.
Yeah, just from a little bitty thing.
Yeah.
But what we learned, so there are two great lessons on that. I'll just tell one where the market absolutely collapsed about a month into it, and I was short, and I had made on the one trade, I'd made $750,000 in a day, which was a ton of money. And I hadn't raised the 25 million yet. We were raising raising money. So we were raising.
So you're still rating your PA at this point.
Right. We had like $1 million. We were up 75% in a day. And I thought the market was going to keep going lower. And so I went over to the Galleria to buy a pair of shoes. And I came back and the market had gone $250,000 against me. So you barely had cell phones. Nobody had communication and stuff back then. And so I liquidated the position, and I keep those shoes in my closet, and I look at, because they're the most expensive shoes I've ever bought. $250,000 for a pair of loafers. It's like, if you take your eye off the ball for even 1 minute in the commodities market, you can be done.
What a great lesson.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And so I was in that for a while, and then we got out, and then we kind of, Chris Baggins and John Hopper and I started a company with a couple other guys, good for Kirby Shanks and Steve Slack, Andrew Baggins, and we started IMD, which is kind of the pioneer of asset management
optimization.
Yeah. And so that was, we didn't invent it, but we were right along there when it was being invented, and that was a great run of managing other people's assets in the gas business. Yeah, and that's what led in 2004 when, after Enron collapsed, there was, the credit crunch was incredible. All the big banks are starting to come in because everybody's got to have massive amounts of credit. And so the smaller organizations just couldn't keep up. And so my idea was to say, well, like, utilities have great credit. They have plenty of capital, and they already have the assets. Why don't we go to them and do a joint venture with them? Because the utility used to make the decision to put their assets out for management in March, right? Whether that was a good time to do it or not.
They just did it in March.
It's like, it's March 10th. Now we've got to go, put this out, and we get whatever the market pays us. And I went to them and said, look, let's try it this way, where you retain the assets, we'll manage them for you. We'll put together people that you can't possibly hire within your infrastructure. And so we kind of, with the lateral thinking, we'll do it completely different. You put up the credit. If you can recognize that you can't retain the kind of talent that it takes to actually manage this, then we'll have a good partnership. And Fred Klein, who was the CFO of WGL, Washington Gas Light at that time, after meeting after meeting after meeting, he'd look at me and said, I've thought of every reason why we shouldn't do this anymore, and we've answered them all. So I guess we have to do it. And so they took the risk of doing it, and it went on to be a great success.
So explain what that means. They have
all these,
assets.
so a public utility retains assets to meet their peak demand. So if their peak demand is a BCF a day in December, in June it's 100,000 a day, right? So they've got lots of excess capacity, and they're incentivized to maximize the value of that capacity, and then they share those revenues with the ratepayers. And Washington Gas Light's in 3 different jurisdictions: Maryland, D.C., and Virginia, which are all tough jurisdictions. But our asset optimization program withstood repeated reviews by all those regulators because it produced hundreds of millions of dollars over the years of returns to the ratepayer, and it did well for Washington Gas Light, did well for us. So it was one of those alignment of it. We're all, if I was to ever be asked exactly what is it that you try and do in business, is how do you align people's interests to go achieve long-term recurring earnings at a lower risk level?
Yeah.
And that worked great because the Washington Gas Light greats, Terry, Adrian Chapman, all these guys, they were Tony Nee, they were great guys, and they understood, and they worked really hard and leveraged. They were great at what they did, but they weren't necessarily going to be great at optimizing storage assets, right? That's not, you train up a regulatory manager or CEO to manage the regulatory process because that's how they get paid, not to know when to roll your hedges from June to July.
Yeah.
So anyway,
that was IMD.
That was IMD, and kind of the
That
beginning
morphed into Vega.
That morphed into Vega. That was kind of the backbone of what Vega was.
Okay.
And then they came along. If you list the top 10 people in the United States that have gotten no credit for saving and changing the direction of the country, George Mitchell would certainly be one of the top 10, because the shale revolution has forever changed the course of history. Right? If you think about it, we've gone from producing 48 BCF a day on a decline and importing gas in this country to where we're producing 105 BCF a day on our way to producing 125 to 130 BCF, based upon really one guy's insistence that they figure out how to do this and they do not patent it. That's transformational. And so when the shale revolution came, we're sitting around, we were commissioning, we're helping Exxon commission Golden Pass for import, right? They hired us to do that.
As an asset optimizer.
And which we did, and that worked out really well. But we're looking around saying, well, imports, we imported, and that was like one of the last cargoes to kind of come in. And we were talking to them. They said, are you familiar with a place called the Marcellus? And we said, well, we know where it is on the map. So, well, we've been looking at some acquisitions up there. How would you get gas out of the Marcellus? And we said, well, that's a good question. And we did a bunch of analysis work, and that's when the projects that we ultimately did together, one of them, we worked on several different pipeline projects to move gas out of Susquehanna County down to D.C. In Pennsylvania. We're right next door to Cabot, one of the great all-time companies in the history.
In this building we're in right now.
Yeah. One of the greatest meetings I ever had in my life was with the great Jeff Hutton, where I laid out a deal to him to build a pipeline for $800,000 a day from Susquehanna County down to just south of Philadelphia, Station 210 at a Transco. And he said, well, what do you want? And we talked through the whole thing. And I said, well, what do you want from me? I said, well, I'd like you to take 400,000 a day of that capacity.
Half the capacity.
And he said, what are you going to do with the rest of it? I said, well, I got to call Southwestern, Chesapeake, or some of these other guys. He says, well, what if I take all of it? And I walked out of I said, that would be great. I walked out of the meeting. I said, I just had the greatest single meeting of my life.
100% customer before.
100% customer.
First meeting.
Total. They took the entire thing. Dan Dingus, those guys, Cabot, understood. I mean, the Marcellus, it's insane. The Marcellus is 120 miles from New York City. And we take that gas because they wouldn't let us build Constitution.
Right.
You can't get it to the city. Cuomo won't let us do it. So we take it to Japan and to India. That's how messed up some of those things are. But the Cabot guys, so we built Meade with Williams and Meade Pipeline, yep, which was Atlantic Sunrise, more commonly known. We did a big LNG export deal with Gale at Cove Point. And we did the Stonewall deal, which you guys helped us with.
And just so everybody listening, that was one of the deals when I was a TPH at the time, and we came in and provided some capital alongside what you guys were doing, and that was one of the best transactions we ever did and one of the quickest turns, right?
Right. It was 18 months or something, right? It was a great return, a great asset, and because we knew, right, that the projects were Meade, Jackson, and Sherman, which was obviously all Civil War general references. And we picked Meade because after the Battle of Gettysburg, everything had been going from south to north, which is how all the gas used to move. And after Gettysburg, everything went from north to south. And that's what's happened from here on out, right? The Marcellus, we moved Texas and Oklahoma to Pennsylvania. Talk about changing the world.
You know what, Josh, that little interesting history tidbit
Yes.
is worth the price of admission for this whole damn podcast.
Well, I'm actually thinking to myself, I'm being a terrible host right now because I am enthralled with this conversation.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even want to interrupt him.
Right.
Yeah. Please interrupt. No, I'll run on all.
So north to south, moving to gas,
Yeah.
and so you spent a lot of time around the gas business, obviously.
By the way, you hear the history major coming out.
Yeah,
Thanks for a great
Yeah.
conversation. Yeah.
You can't keep it down. But ultimately, you sold this business.
I did.
So what was the catalyst for that?
Well, we had a partnership with Washington Gas Light that developed over time. We also were instrumental in building of Mountain Valley Pipeline, which I, again, would come back to later to say one of the single most important pieces of steel in the country, and everybody fought it. And, it took an act of Congress and Supreme Court to get it built, and it's going to be
Literally.
Literally. Supreme Court, I think, twice. But we got to the point where we were doing deals with Gale and in storage and all these kind of things on a long-term basis. And one of our fundamental things that we believed in 2009, 2010, that WGL also agreed in, was that natural gas storage is hugely valuable. You're growing your supply mix from 50 BCF a day in the lower 48 to 100 BCF, and you're increasing your storage availability from 4 TCF to 4 TCF, right? So we haven't increased the storage to keep up with the supply growth. And we were just like adamant. And so we just kept buying it and by contracting
Okay.
long-term. We contracted long-term for storage at very low rates because nobody wanted it, because it's very passé. Who wants that? You don't need it. Well, suddenly when, Uri and other things come along, when people realize that the grid doesn't function without storage, then everybody's got to have it. And so that's why storage now, the spreads are $1, because people realize, you know what, I can't actually function in the modern space without that. And I think people say, no, I've been bullish natural gas my entire life, and it hasn't always been correct.
And you're not 14 years old.
That's right. And it's one of those things where you can look at it clearly and say, this is something so essential that the country literally can't survive without it. Yet we're selling it today, right? There were many times this year where the price of natural gas was $1.60, $1.50, $1.25. And that's what it was trading in 1991, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me one other thing that you could buy in 1991 and you could pay the same price for today. Almost nothing. So it's incredibly inexpensive. But if you're willing to stay in the game for the long term, it pays off. It just not necessarily in all the ways that you would think. And may not be super. Right? Obviously, Donald Trump is not in favor of high prices. He's in favor of more volume, which is good, but less regulation.
So storage became more valuable.
Storage became more
somebody
valuable. Okay.
came along and offered you a price you couldn't refuse, or
No, so our Washington Gas Light was acquired. A company came in and acquired Washington Gas Light.
so your key partner,
Our key partner was acquired, and now we have a new partner who is Canadian, and they're like, well, I'm not sure we have the same interests as you guys. And we said, okay, well, let us buy out this partnership. So we'll buy you out of the partnership. And while we were putting together the financing to do that, because suddenly we've been using their credit all this time, we're going to have to go put together new credit. One of the guys that we were talking to about putting credit together said, well, what if we buy you? And so, the multiples were such and the timing was such that we couldn't say no. So
what year are we talking about then?
So we acquired, we did a acquisition divestiture where we bought back the Gels piece and we sold basically simultaneously to somebody else. And the whole company's still going. And it's one of those things where it was a good deal for ALA, WGL when they sold. They got what they wanted. We got what we wanted. And the buyers, 61C, bought it. This was April of 2021. They've got a great platform and it's doing great. So it was a deal that was structured to where you can look back and everybody won. I mean, probably 80% of acquisitions are a disaster or something like that because people do them for the wrong reasons. This was a really kind of a good overall thing.
nice. So
You could call 61C and ask them, but at least that's what I understand.
yeah, that
I still get Christmas cards for them. Yeah.
There we go. That brings us to Arc57.
Yeah.
The most important question: where did the Arc57?
Yeah. So Vega, the name for Vega was in the Black-Scholes equation, right? V for volatility. What is the log normal of price relatives? V is Vega. That's how you refer to the symbol. Well, Vega, of course, is a star, which was the emblem, and it was the North Star 1,500 years ago or whatever it was Vega.
Okay.
But there are my
History.
back. Yeah, you're just you just got to be right. And so my wife, who is amazing, is an architect, and she says, in all things, she's done all these amazing different things, but she's, there's what's the connection between the old company and the new company? What's the arc? What is the arc that connects those two things? And my son-in-law, who is a lieutenant in the United States Navy, an amazing guy, all my children, 2 daughters and other son-in-law also.
Yeah, they're going to listen to this.
They're awesome. He came back and he said, how about Arc 57? I said, well, what does that mean? He says, well, there are 57 navigable stars in the heavens, meaning when you're at sea, there are 57 stars that you can identify. You've used one of the 57. So that means there's 56 more to go. And I thought that was like, there's so much more work to still be done.
Yeah.
And then most importantly, arc57.com was available. So we had a great name and a great story, and you have to pick something these days that it hasn't been used by somebody else. So that's that.
It's a great story.
As the founder of Pickering Energy Partners, I applaud your ability to find names. Good for you. David, it would be criminal of us if we didn't sort of tap into this knowledge of the market, and what's going on in energy. And so
He's brought handouts today.
I know.
By the way.
I know he's ready. He's very ready.
We'll see.
Yeah. So maybe start with, I think in the prep notes that I sent to you toward the end, I said, you've been an energy advocate in a time period where energy is a dirty word.
Yeah.
So rather than talk about that last, let's talk about it first.
Yeah.
You're sort of unabashedly pro hydrocarbons. Why? And then let's talk about the outlook for hydrocarbons.
I'm a hydrocarbonist, as I like to say, or energy evangelist, because we like to, and it's pretty simple as to why. Is the question I like to ask people is, what percentage of the things that you rely upon in your life are dependent upon hydrocarbons?
I'm not going to fall for this.
100%.
I knew you were going to say it.
100%.
If I said 90%,
There is not one thing that you have. There's not one thing that you do. There's not any, like you have all these post-apocalyptic shows of, whatever the zombie things. Like those people will all be dead, right? There's no way for modern society to exist absent hydrocarbons, full stop. And so it's just shocking to me that you take the most essential thing that we have in our lives, and people are saying, well, we're just I'm done with use that.
Yeah.
And and it kind of, we talked about this earlier, that our kind of deal is, how do things work in the real world? Well, in the real world, you have to have these things. And so how do you go and find them? And how do you build companies around them? And how do you make money doing that? And how do you build good lives for your employees and good life for yourself and a better life for your country? And there's literally nothing more important that can be done today. Not one thing, not Musk going to Mars, because he ain't getting there without hydrocarbons, is finding and producing the cleanest, most efficient, lowest cost source of energy that we can have. Because everything, but the reason we're going to be able to cure cancer and go to the Mars and the moon and beyond is because how data and AI and all those things are happening. There would be no AI initiative right now, zero, absent the shale revolution. Thank you, George Mitchell, because without that, we would not be able to power the things that we are doing. Full stop. It just wouldn't happen. If we were having to import LNG at $15 a decatherm, how much money would we be spending on data centers? Not very much. How many data centers are they going to build in the UK where their alternative cost of energy is $15 versus they're going to build them in the United States where their alternative cost of energy is $2? Hopefully $3.25, but right now $2. So that's why I'm an energy evangelist, because it's.
And what was your comment
obvious
before we started? You were talking about Microsoft's view on the data centers, and
well, Microsoft came out and said, this is how many data centers that we're going to be building. We're building one a day or whatever, some huge number. And when you add that up, that means that Microsoft, we in round numbers, we produce 100 BCF a day of gas in this country. They'll be consuming 6 or 7% of that gas production themselves, just Microsoft.
Actual gas or equivalent of?
Well, if they have a product that requires 24-hour a day power, what are the things that are going to be providing that 24-hour a day power? Natural gas. I mean, you can say it's wind, or you can say, maybe it could be coal, but they're probably not going to be saying that it's coal. So it's essentially, it is equivalence, but it is basically, we have to grow the system of natural gas to do that. Full stop.
Okay. So you're an energy evangelist. Is the next 18 months, is it a good 18 months for hydrocarbons? Does it matter in the long term? It probably doesn't matter in the long term, but you got to get to the long term. What's the next 18 months look like?
Having been a product of the 80s, we all know that things go in cycles. Right? Extraordinary Delusions and the Madness of Crowds, right? In books you can go back and read from the 1860s, they're bubbles. When is the bubble going to burst for Microsoft or Apple? I have no idea. Will it ever? There will be a cycle to it. I don't know what it will be. Where are we in the cycle? The problem is you never know where you are in the cycle. Really, very difficult to know. So is next year going to be good for natural gas? I don't know. I'm trying to do deals that will be good relative to natural gas and oil, because hydrocarbons, that are good over 30 years.
Yeah.
Because it's typically a 5-year cycle. Really, I mean, sometimes it can be worse than that, but there's usually 3 good years. Maybe one of those is really good, one not great year, and one terrible year. You just don't know which year next year is going to be. But if you have a 30-year plan, that means that 15 or 16 of the years, that's exactly right, but or something like that, are going to be good. I mean, more than half, a larger percentage is going to be good than bad. But you have to be in the game for a long time.
Yep.
Now, our storage deal, it was horrible for 8 years. We broke even for 8 years. Everybody thought, why do you want that? Great, I'll just take some more. And then it turned
That's
out
conviction.
and then you took more, and then because it's a low cost option, and then when Uri came along and gas traded $800, people say, well, your price gouges. No, we're not pricing. We're selling gas out of storage at the index price. Whatever the index price is, we're not going to negotiate. Just whatever that price is, we'll sell it to you.
David called his wife and said, we made $750,000 in one day.
I'm going to the gallery to get shoes. I'm back in a minute.
That's right. Are you stealing for shoes? The irony of there, shoes.
Said to go get the shoes, not my wife, right?
Yeah, bring me a pair of shoes. I'm not leaving.
Yeah. Dan, in our notes here, there's great questions, and then there's a comment about an advocate for hydrocarbons. It says DRP note. I think by this time it'll be clear when we get to this part of the discussion. There's no doubt where we stand on this.
There's not a lot of black and white issues here.
Talk to us about LNG. You were commissioning an import facility. We're going the other direction.
Yeah.
How big's LNG as a story?
I think LNG is a huge story. It's an essential part of what happens because you need to be able to exchange and balance. Right? The United States is a big place. What happens in California, what happens in Florida, what happens in New York are all different. You could go into lots of stories about that. But now that energy has always been a global economy with global consequences. And the United States' role in World War II, Texas provided all the energy for the war effort. Not some of it. Like 87% of the energy, and Oklahoma. I mean, like Texas, Oklahoma area. We went and met with people in Europe, Germany, England, in 2012 when we were doing a deal.
Say, wait, in World War II?
No. And but
I'm having so much fun.
We were there, and we were saying, we will build the LNG facility in the United States. We will bring it to the UK, and we will bring it to Germany because you shouldn't rely upon Russian gas.
This was what year?
2012, when all the LNG deals were getting built. And from Merkel on down and from Cameron on down, the word was, we don't need LNG from the United States. We've got Russian supply. We're set. It's just right there.
Yeah, pipelines are fine.
We're like, we'll take the risk. We're not going to make you commit to the LNG tanker. You just agree to buy it at a market price. And they chose not to. So I don't think people are going to be making that mistake again. And so people will be forced to build reliable LNG distribution networks. There's a ton of natural gas in the Middle East, right? Qatar has more natural gas than you can even imagine. So there's lots of natural gas around the world, which means it is going to be powering things for the next 300 years. Not for the next 30 years, not for the next 3 years, for the next 300 years. So if you were to look at the United States and say, I want to make an investment that is going to be good for my kids, my grandkids, and all those kind of things, what's the single best investment you could possibly make? Is it minerals? Is it an oil company? Not really.
Education, David.
Well, education is very important, but how do you pay for the education, which is a piece of steel in the ground? Right? When they built think of what they cost to build the little inch and the big inch, from Texas Eastern to New York during the war or right after the war, to move oil up there, to do all these amazing things. And now it runs. Texas Eastern flows gas everywhere. And if you had talked to the people in 1947, 1948, of what was going to happen with this waste byproduct natural gas, nobody would have said that it would have been a multi-billion-dollar business 70, 80 years from now. It's the same thing. 70 or 80 years from now, people are going to say, how come we only built one Mountain Valley pipeline? There were all these other projects that people wanted to build. Why did we only build one? Why didn't we build more of those? So the steel in the ground is not very sexy, but it's going to cash flow for 100 years. Tell me one other thing that cash flows for 100 years. Not Microsoft, not Apple, not anybody. So they're great assets.
What do you think LNG today's, 13 BCF a day, give or take?
Yeah.
What do you think that number is in 2035?
Oh man, Well, what is it?
It's a decade.
It's
Yeah,
a
next decade. So I think the thing that's critical is the first thing we will do with LNG, assuming we can get the regulatory red tape out of the way, is we will build too much. That's how.
I completely agree.
That's
Keep
what
going.
that's what we always do.
Tell me more.
We always build too much.
Mhm.
So should we build 26.2 BCF a day of LNG export? Yeah. So if what we need is 26, we'll probably build 31.
Mhm.
So I think that if we used to say in 2010, 2011, when the shale revolution was kind of percolating, in the Marcellus, we used to say 17 and 17, right? 17 BCF a day and 7 from a state that was producing 1 BCF, ended up being 35 and 17.
Yeah.
So I think when we say, to say 35 and 35 is if
We heard it here first.
I'm telling you,
Well,
I'm actually impressed.
if the regulation will stay out of the way. I mean, look at the next decade, guys. I mean, the stuff that Matt Shossman did to make the whole next decade deal, somebody you ought to talk to on this. It's one of the greatest stories of all time,
Yeah.
what they've done to make
He's
that deal work.
Did a lot of bobbing and weaving. to
He
get
did.
there.
A lot of bobbing. And they're big projects. They're expensive projects, but we're just going to build a lot of them.
Okay. And in a world where we need this for 300 years, cycles look like little squiggles, but 35 BCF a day in 2035 feels like it would absolutely oversupply the global LNG market somewhere along the way there. So you're
Does that matter? Does oversupply good or a bad thing to grow markets?
if you are the owner,
I didn't. You ought to invest in LNG. I said is oversupply good or bad to grow demand?
this is spoken like a guy who is now not owning this deal or taking those tariffs every day.
No, we own the pipes.
Yeah.
They're going to flow through the pipes to go.
Yeah.
Whoever happens to end up owning, I didn't think it was going to be the first owner of the LNG. That might necessarily
Okay.
be right, but no, I just think that the demand is going to be there because everything's going to. Electric generation demand in Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia has the potential to double in the next 5 years. ERCOT guy, the new ERCOT guy, was just saying the other day.
Pablo Vega,
Yeah. Electricity demand in Texas is going to double in 5 years. We were talking about this earlier, 5 or whatever, not in very few years. So that which it took us 70 years to establish, we got to go do that again in 5 years. And what we've been doing the last 70 years doesn't work.
Right.
I'm gonna say something controversial. It's not gonna double in 5 years because it can't. There's not an ability to deliver 2x.
Well, demand for the product is
The product, meaning electricity.
energy in the form that is required to do the things that we want to do, right, is at twice the capacity of what we have the ability to serve
There we go.
in 5 years.
Yeah.
So I agree. Is like, we should have already, why on earth is the price of natural gas in West Virginia $1.50 and the price of gas on the other side of the Appalachians in winter $15?
And why is it negative in West Texas?
And why is it? Because they don't let you build the infrastructure. Right. The single most important thing that Trump can do is appoint somebody in the FERC to help reduce regulation.
David, is power, in a previous podcast, we had one of these discussions where power feels like it's going to get bottlenecked, but maybe one of the best things is the reason it's going to get bottlenecked is because sexy companies like Microsoft and Meta and Google need more of it. And those are the guys that are going to get people to pay attention.
Right.
And then maybe you do get more permits and more pipelines and more things built. Do you think that's the
Well,
case?
Exxon just announced that they're going to build a 1.5 gig plant that's going to be off the grid. So they don't have to go through a bunch of the permitting and stuff. They're just going to build it. And data center is going to take 100% of the offtake, and they're going to sequester 90% of the carbon. It's going to take them 5 years. Okay, we need to do that. That's 300,000 a day of demand, roughly. So we need to do 15 of those in Texas or some huge number. It can be done. I don't know whether it's just like whenever anybody asks me about climate change and how terrible it is, my in a kind of a quasi-Socratic method is what is your opinion on nuclear? Because if it isn't, it's the greatest thing in the history of the world, and we should be building 1,000 of those, then you don't really care about climate change. Because if you care about climate change, we should be building nuclear everywhere. We're totally going off topic here, but it's okay. But that's what people should be doing.
Yep.
If we want to solve the power demand deal, Exxon is going to stand up. This is the first time Exxon's built a serious power plant. And if they can build one, they'll build 15.
By the way, that goes with your Kruger.
Dunning-Kruger.
Yeah.
Yeah. The greatest graph of all time. Yeah.
Do you want to describe this graph?
So the Dunning-Kruger study that was done in 1999, if your y-axis is which is the one that goes like up
Vertical.
building,
Yes.
is your confidence in your knowledge of the topic. And the x-axis, horizontal, is your actual knowledge of the topic. Your confidence is highest, 100%, when your actual knowledge is 0. And then as you get more and more informed on the topic, your confidence goes down because there's more and more things that you realize that you don't know. And then as you get to the end of the curve,
Expert level,
your confidence level only ever gets back to like 70%.
Because you're not smart enough to know it all.
You're smart enough to know that you don't know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are all these people out there that have a lot of confidence in their opinions. They're 100% confident that we have to fix climate change, and the way that we're going to do it is with renewables. Okay, well, how does that work? It doesn't matter how it works. It matters that I'm 100% confident that's what we're going to do. Right? I guarantee you that the Biden administration has no real understanding of the impact of the Inflation Reduction Act, what it actually means, how that echoes the economy. They just said, if we incentivize these things, it's gonna fix the problem, and it's just wrong. It's not gonna fix the problem. It's gonna create other problems.
Do you think there's money to be made in decarbonization and
We've done all
things like that?
Well, absolutely. I think there's already been a ton of money to be made. And I think, going back to the earlier comment, most of the big decarbonization plays are multi-$100 million deals, right? They're big
Infrastructure.
big expensive stuff. That's very expensive to do. And almost all of it, if not all of it, requires some form of subsidization from somebody, right? Carbon sequestration is a money loser. It will always be a money loser, and it's never going to make money because you got to have somebody that's going to pay to sequester carbon. They got to want to do that. It's not going to, you're going to take carbon and stick it in the ground.
Well, taxes would be the reason that it turns into a moneymaker.
Taxes?
Wouldn't it be? You tax carbon, and then you can make money by
that's
getting rid of it.
not making money. No, you can't tax something. You don't tax something to make money with it. You tax something to confiscate your wealth to go do something else that you want to do. Right.
Agree.
Yeah. Or confiscate is not maybe the best word, but it is what they're doing. But
we understood exactly what you were saying. Yeah.
But anyway, so we did a bunch of work. We have ranches in Montana. We're huge proponents of nature-based carbon sequestration, rotational grazing, no-till drill. The government subsidizes 80% of the corn production in North America, ethanol and all these kind of things. If they just said, starting tomorrow, you have to use no-till drills.
What does no-till drill mean?
It's you don't tear up the soil and release all the carbon. You drill the seed in, and it has a lower carbon impact. It's what we do, and a lot of people do it. It's a very efficient way to do things. It would cost nothing to speak of, and it would radically increase the total amount of nature-based carbon sequestration that would occur in the world tomorrow. But the farmer lobby wouldn't like it because they don't like to be told what to do, and they don't want to have their economics change. We do rotational grazing on our ranch because it makes the most sense. You move the cows. It's how the herds moved across, the United States. Buffalo, they didn't stay in one area forever. They moved. And they'd eat and tear up, and the grass would come back. And if you rotationally graze on your land, that's what happens. And that's nature-based carbon sequestration. That works. ranchers should not sell their carbon credits yet because, somebody, well, they offered me $100,000 for my carbon credits. I'm like, wait, because if they're going to pay you $5 a ton or $10 a ton, when the alternative for what Exxon's talking about of taking carbon, capturing it, and sticking it in the Gulf of Mexico, that's going to cost $150 a ton. So wait till you get paid a higher price.
Let me stop for just a second.
Yeah.
Turn this alarm off. It's about to go. So that's 45 minutes. We're doing great.
Okay.
By the way, I've already made notes in here where you are, we're going to create a reoccurring role for you.
He's coming back. I've just been fired.
No. No, this is it's outstanding to listen to. I just wanted to make you guys aware of that.
Yeah.
But
Thank you. David, what's let's shift over to like what you're actually doing
Right
now in terms of ARC57. So give us a couple of examples of things you're doing. You've talked about creating businesses with long-lasting impact. So just give us a snapshot of the things you're working on that you find interesting, areas you're focused on.
Well, so in order to create long-term recurring earnings, you have to have a market that has enough depth that you can participate in it, right? If you go to some place where they're only drilling 2 wells a year and you want to be in an oilfield service business, that's not going to be very good. So you have to have depth in the market, and then you have to have breadth in the market. And so, as you know, most people probably don't, is we're producing 105 BCF a day of natural gas. By 2032 or 2033, we're going to have to replace 100 BCF of that production, right? The decline curves are so steep. We are going to have to continue to drill and to drill and to drill and to drill. And that means that all the things that circulate around the drill bit, all of the oil field service kind of related things, are going to continue to go in depth. And when people tell me, I don't know what the opportunity is in the world, or I don't know how I can do anything, everything's already been done, I'm like, buy a white truck and drive to Midland and get a job. There's more opportunity in the Permian than 1,000 people graduating from the University of Texas could go shake a stick out. Most of them just don't want to do it. They want to go to New York. They want to go do these other kind of things or whatever it may be. But they're terrified that the hydrocarbon, if I go do hydrocarbons, I'm going to be out of business in 3 years. And it's just not true. So the Permian, in our estimation, if you notice, most of the stuff we talked about, 80% of the business that I've done, despite being a 7th generation Texan, was out of state, right? Because the competition here was already pretty good. The Texas intrastates they know what they're doing. But we are now doing a ton of business in Texas, almost exclusively everything in Texas. Some in Montana, some in Louisiana. And my favorite place on the planet is the Permian. And if you can go build a platform to do something in the Permian, then there's really no limit to what you can do. It's because there's a shortage of people, there's a shortage of infrastructure. So we look at things in a very high level. It's like there's the drill bit, there's oil field service, and then the concentric ring around that we call ham sandwiches. We've talked about this before, where if you go out to the Permian and you find what they want is a ham sandwich, then sell them a ham sandwich. So the margin on the drill bit today is 15 or 20%. The margin in the oil field service business is probably 30 or 40% because it's higher risk. The margins on ham sandwiches, if you can identify them, is 100%. So go find the ham sandwich option, right? And you don't have to have a PhD. It doesn't hurt to have a PhD either, but you don't have to have a PhD to go be in the ham sandwich business.
So you're looking for businesses that can.
We are stepping away from the drill bit and doing. So we have a completion pipe business. We have some. It's basically we rent different types of items that help with completion work, and both on new wells, but also reworking. There's 40,000 wells, or just the well numbers, and that have to be constantly reworked. So there's a good business of coming in, building relationships, and understanding how to do that.
Okay,
and then that allows you to do the next thing. And one of the other thing we do is we have a commercial generator services business that has been very successful. And everybody has to have a generator. The one thing, when you alluded to, we're not going to get to that power demand growth, but the power demand is going to grow faster than we can keep up with, which is going to make the grid inherently unstable for the next 20 years, which means that everybody that actually has to have power is going to have backup power. Every hospital, every data center, every office building, houses, if you can afford it, are going to have generator backups. And so we built a business to service. We don't have to sell them. We don't have to rent them. We do sell and rent, but we don't have to. But somebody's got to come in and fix those things. And a lot of the guys, we have great people that work for us and work with us in that business. A lot of them are former military guys. They learned a lot in the military about how to work on that type of equipment. They come out, they've done their 20, and they come and just are amazing, hardworking partners in doing that business. So we like that. If it involves a wrench, that's really good.
If you go to the website, you have 3 people with the title of business development. So they're all out creating deal flow. How easy is it to find deals? How do you find ham sandwiches?
Well, I think interestingly enough, some of these things come through the most unusual of, circuitous routes. So we love talking to people. We love bringing in people, or we have people come to us, call us. I've kind of always made myself available to my friends' children. Okay, can Bill Smith come have lunch with you? He just graduated from college. And I said, yes, absolutely. And I'll give him this similar story, but I want to hear what he's thinking about, because and that's how our business started in the Permian. Is we had a very young, smart guy come to me and said, let me just explain to you what's happening here in the Permian. We want to kind of go do this, and this is how we think we ought to do it. I said, well, that's a terrible way to do it. Why don't we go try and do it this way? Right? There was going to be some owner financing at 20% kind of thing, disaster. But let's go do it this way. And they're great guys, and we have a great.
You build a company around it?
We build a company around it, but we have a general counsel, all the accounting functions, business development guys, analysts, people that can identify structuring people that you couldn't afford to support an individual company. And we can bring it into, apply it to something and help really get it going. And our vision on Alliance, as an example, is which is the oil field service kind of business in Permian, is that it's going to be around for 50 years. My goal is that, as I tell this to Charlie and Cody,
Those were the guys that
two of the guys, yeah. Charlie came to us first. Cody is the lead guy. Great guys. Is that this is going to be one of those businesses where their children say, or their grandchildren say, my granddad started this business. Well, what was the core of the business? He just went out and found out what people needed, and he gave them that service. And we've been doing that. People ask us to do something, we did that. How long you do it for? 50 years. How long did you make money? 50 years.
No.
Go ahead.
I'm just listening. One of the last questions you have on here is about the energy entrepreneurs. What advice do you have? I would imagine a lunch with him is exceptional. If you're a young entrepreneur trying to figure out how to do things, is that one of the questions is, what advice do you give energy entrepreneurs?
Any entrepreneur, I would say, don't discount the energy business. First of all, everybody's, I got to be in software. I've got to do tech. I got to go do something else. Look for the lower barrier to entry, and then go out there and do something. Right? The old adage of, you ask the old guy, how'd you get to be so rich? And he said, well, by making good decisions. How do you learn to make good decisions? By making bad decisions. Right. So if you go out and actually do something, that's the hardest thing. So many people want to say, okay, I've got to pay my dues, or I've got to, go do something.
Right.
And sometimes you don't have the opportunity, but North Dakota, right? The Bakken, Haynesville, Eagleford, certainly the Permian. If you just pack your lunch and get on Southwest Airlines, you can be there tomorrow, rent a car. I mean, you will get a job, or you can figure out what people need. So It's a much bigger this is the most important thing I'll say. We had no idea how big the opportunity was in 1986 when we all got into this stuff, right? And now the opportunity today, the inflection point that we're at today, is bigger than it was then. The opportunity for people to do it now is bigger than it was then.
Well, I'm not kidding. We're going to create something to have you
Yeah.
back on this thing. There's
One of the things he said that's really interesting to me, Josh, and then we'll move our way to.
Well, no, I would listen to this for 2 more hours.
I know.
This is my first.
This is why Joe
Yeah.
Rogan goes for 3 hours.
I'm telling you.
Yeah, you get on the thing. Yeah.
David said, you know what you do? We like the Permian. There's a shortage of people and infrastructure is constrained. And then look for places where there are low barriers to entry. That's actually exactly opposite of don't go someplace where it's hard to find people. Don't go place where there's not a lot of infrastructure. Don't go to low barriers to entry because anybody can do it. And what you're saying is, well, maybe there's opportunities there.
Yeah. Well, it's a low barrier to entry in the Permian because there's 100 jobs and there's 10 people that live there, right? If you look at Conoco just as an example, they have planes going back and forth. People are doing 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. They're trying to figure out how to get people out there. Figure out how to make people's lives in the oil patch better, right?
The ham sandwich
Yeah.
analogy is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's a great way to look at it. It doesn't have to be the most creative way. Just figure it out.
Just to be something.
Yeah.
Just go figure it out.
Yeah. There's not a shortage of opportunities. There's not a shortage of opportunities. And the greatest thing is Houston, where everybody ought to move, has a look hard. It has a
Bro, my biggest business is real estate, apartments.
I know nothing but my own house. I mean, because it's a low cost of living, great restaurants, amazing people, pretty good schools, not the best, but pretty good schools, but amazing entrepreneurial climate in this city. And better than Dallas, better than New York, better than Atlanta, better than LA by a stretch, certainly better than San Francisco.
That's a great capper.
We're sending that part to the Greater Houston
Yes.
Board, right?
Exactly. What this is,
fact checker's going to be coming out here any minute now.
this is now the part where David says, and I'm launching my campaign for mayor of Houston.
I almost asked him that when we were talking offline.
David, we do a lightning round where we're going to ask you some one-word answer questions.
Okay.
And it helps us get to know you a little bit better, have some fun, but also get some more information. So, Josh, you want to kick it off?
Please, sushi or tacos?
Tacos.
Work from office or work from home?
Office.
Where is this here? Will U.S. LNG exports reach 25 BCF a day by 2030?
Yes.
Ferraris or Corvettes?
Range Rover.
Okay, fair.
Carbon capture or hydrogen?
Neither.
Adele or AC/DC?
Adele.
Will the world hit net zero by 2050?
No way.
Cash or crypto?
Gold. Sorry.
Will there be widespread repeals of the IRA subsidies?
I don't think so.
A new question, but one I love. AI, will it remain tamed or contained, or is the Terminator world a possibility?
I'm an optimist. So I think the Terminator world is always a possibility. I happen to believe in some other higher powers that are more influential than AI. So I think it's going to help us cure cancer. I think it's going to help us be smarter about how we do things with the oceans. And I think it's all going to be fueled by natural gas.
We've done 35 or 40 podcasts, and we've never let anyone answer that long before. That's a real compliment to you, David. S&P 500 for 2025, bullish or bearish?
Bullish.
Dan, once you finish this off there, this is the question. I feel like I know what he's going to answer on this. I'm excited about this.
Yes. So, will the Houston Texans make the Super Bowl in the next decade?
No.
Josh?
You almost had a return vault.
I mean, we thought David might come back.
Wish.
No, you know we had.
I had to speak from my heart.
Yes.
I had to speak from my heart.
Well, before you shut us down,
Yeah.
I just want to tell you, I really you were gracious in coming up here with us. This is our first time to be in the studio.
That's great space.
We thoroughly enjoyed our time before Dan. But anybody listening should watch this episode. Dan looks incredibly festive.
Yeah.
It is a very Christmas. I mean, you look great.
Sweater and socks matching.
Yes.
Glowing red.
Yeah, it's good.
And I'm going to find out with Dan how we can get you back on here, because really this could be a 2 or 3 hour interview. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I know the audience did too. So
Yeah, that's great. Happy to do it.
www.arc57.com. David Modesett, we appreciate your time.
Happy to be here.
Thanks,
guys. Cheers. Appreciate it.